Mic check 1 2. It's the Y2K collector, and I honestly might have to start game hunting in the wild again. I recently saw a video from a YouTuber. I believe he's called his channel Memory Card, and he's basically starting a video game collecting journey using the same formula that we've seen on YouTube here for God knows how many years now. But I think what's different about his approach is that it feels very organic. It doesn't feel forced, and it doesn't really feel like something he's just doing just to make content. And even if he is just doing it to make content, I get the vibes that there's a genuine desire to relive or recapture some of that childhood nostalgia, which is purely why I myself have been engaged and involved with retro game collecting for so long. I think that a lot of people who really got into the hobby during the hype, especially during the days of the YouTube hype, I feel like a lot of those folks have really kind of either fallen away or, they're not really as into it anymore because for a lot of those people, they were either doing it to gain clout on the internet, on YouTube. They were trying to grow a channel. They were trying to make content. They were trying to, make money. They were doing it for a lot of the reasons, outside of the nostalgia. And I think there are some people who the nostalgia factor just doesn't really matter to them as much anymore. They're kind of over it. The nostalgia factor was probably something that really hit them hard during the pandemic when they had nowhere to go. Maybe times where they were a little, sad or even depressed at, just everything that was going on. And I think they've probably kind of awoken out of that nostalgia days that they were in. And now they're kind of ready to just kind of move on to something else. And, when we think about the hobby or when we see the content around retro game collecting, a lot of it is very reseller centric. It's very reseller focused. It's very, centered around how you can flip this game to buy this game to make money or to build a business or to build your retro game collecting business. It feels all very rather money concentrated, money focused. And I think that's a big part of the reason why a lot of people are kind of turned off from watching that type of content. They're just kind of turned off from it. And this, channel that, I've recently discovered over the past couple days, it has a very organic feel to it. It feels like something that I would have seen at the beginning of 2020 from a small YouTube creator who genuinely just wanted to recreate some memories. And I gotta say, it really put me in a place where I wanted to kind of get back out there and start doing some game hunting again. Especially with the kind of week that I've had, I was actually out and about earlier this week, and I was able to find a complete in box copy of Superman for the original Game Boy. And I feel like I'm one of the few people that I know that still buys original Game Boy games and actually collect them, because the original Game Boy was my first console ever. So, there's a super nostalgic place in my heart for these games, especially when I see them original in their box. It just takes me back to a place. That same day, I also found a complete in box copy of the Justice League for the Sega Genesis, which again is another console that I collect for. And these aren't really consoles that are growing in popularity. I think a lot of people are still very much on, the GameCube. A lot of people are still on like the PlayStation 2. Those are popular consoles to collect for, but anything Nintendo really is still popular. But, the Sega Genesis, a lot like the Xbox, is kind of like the stepchild. They feel like stepchild consoles. Even though, don't get me wrong, there is a cult following for the Genesis. I know a ton of people who love the Genesis. But when it comes to the broader collecting space, Nintendo rather, seems to be the more popular thing to talk about, especially here on YouTube. And I've always had a special place for the Game Boy and for the Sega Genesis. And just being out in the wild this week and being able to kind of see that there is stuff out there, is cool. Now, I think it's easy to kind of get caught up in the euphoria, especially when you're kind of predisposed to this type of nostalgic content, and especially when you're already somewhat entrenched into the hobby. It's easy to kind of wake up and say, man, I think I'm going to go game hunting every day. And but that's not reality, right? Reality is that there's still life that you have to live. There's still things that you have to do. You have your responsibilities. And just because you watch a YouTube video doesn't mean that overnight you've somehow gained an extra 20 disposable hours in your week to go game hunting. But I do think that the same way I carve out time for the gym, the same way that I carve out time for, other things, it might be cool to dedicate maybe an hour or two per month, maybe 3 hours per month to just kind of going out and seeing what I can find out in the wild. And it's really a luck of the draw, honestly. I hear easy gamers say this quite often, that it's really just kind of a luck of the draw, especially depending on where you live. If you live in a place that has a lot of venues and places where you can, where you have a higher probability of finding good stuff, then definitely you're in a good space and you can take advantage. But I think, again, YouTube kind of can somewhat paint this picture that the deals are just everywhere, and you have people on YouTube who spend weeks and months driving all over the place. They literally go from city to city, state to state, looking for deals. And that's just not feasible for most people. Most people don't have that kind of time, gas, energy, they just don't have it. And so I think, managing expectations and being okay with going game hunting and finding nothing is also something that I think collectors in 2025 and game hunters in 2025, or maybe I'm just talking to myself, maybe that's something that I have to be okay with, knowing that, hey, you know what, I'm going to go out and I probably won't find anything that's worth collecting, but there's just still some joy in going out there and just seeing what's out there, even if you find nothing. And I think that's the joy of the hunt, when you're really hunting for nostalgia, when you're really hunting for genuine joy in the hobby, and just really finding something that's going to kind of take you back to that place, whether it be emotionally, mentally, even spiritually, if you want to think about it that way. But I think there's just something real cool about that. And I to the creator, Memory Card, I almost want to thank him for kind of almost re-inspiring me not to get up and try to game hunt, 24 hours a day. But I think he just kind of gives a great reminder as to why a lot of us kind of got into this in the first place, and, kind of have that passion for game collecting, especially when it comes to retro games. So that might be something that you guys see from me, even if it's once a month, even if I just do one video per month where you guys see me out and about in the field, game hunting, going out, picking up things, hitting up my local spots, going to play and trade events, whatever the case may be. I think that's something that might be cool to kind of incorporate back to the channel, because it is something that I did a lot of, a few years ago. And I used to do more of that type of content before. But again, after a while, it started to feel rinse and repeat. It started to feel like, it just didn't really feel good, and whether that was because of me, because of time, because of just what the space had become, here on YouTube, it didn't mean that I wasn't doing it at all, but it just didn't really feel like something I wanted to showcase on my channel as much. So, but yeah, man, shout out to that dude. I'm looking forward to his series. I think he has a series where he's going to be building up his PlayStation 2 collection. So shout out to him. And shout out to me, because, I'll probably, try to see, like I said, if I can carve out an extra hour or two per month to see what I can find. So, but let me know what you guys think. Let me know if game hunting is still, relevant in 2025. Is it worth your time? And is it more about finding these amazing grails, or is there really just genuinely joy in the hunt? Let me know your thoughts, and I'll catch you in the next one. It's the Y2K Collector. Take it easy.